On a sunny morning in Sarajevo, a shot rang out. The city, nestled in the heart of the Balkans, was bustling with life. People went about their daily routines, unaware that this day would go down in history. It was June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated. He and his wife Sophie were killed by a Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. The couple had been on a goodwill visit hoping to ease tensions in the region. Austria-Hungary, a vast empire stretching across Central Europe, was furious. They blamed Serbia for the assassination, seeing it as an attack on their sovereignty. The empire, already a patchwork of different nationalities and cultures, was on edge. This event was the spark that lit the fuse of World War I. But the tensions had been building for years. Nationalistic fervor, imperial ambitions, and a complex web of alliances had created a volatile situation in Europe. Europe was a powder keg of nationalism, imperialism, and military buildup. Countries were arming themselves to the teeth, preparing for a conflict that seemed inevitable. The assassination of the Archduke was merely the final straw. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand was the match that ignited the powder keg. Within weeks, the major powers of Europe were mobilizing their armies, setting the stage for a conflict that would engulf the world. The world watched as Europe plunged into war. Families bid tearful goodbyes to their loved ones, not knowing if they would ever see them again. Newspapers were filled with headlines about the impending conflict, and a sense of dread hung in the air. This war would become known as the Great War. It was a war of unprecedented scale and devastation, involving nations from every corner of the globe. Soldiers faced unimaginable horrors in the trenches, and entire cities were reduced to rubble. It was a war unlike any before it, a global conflict that would reshape the 20th century. The aftermath of World War I would leave deep scars on the world, setting the stage for future conflicts and shaping the course of history for generations to come. Europe in the early 20th century was a web of alliances. These alliances were complex and interwoven, creating a fragile balance of power. Nations were bound by treaties and agreements, promising to defend each other in times of conflict. This intricate network was supposed to maintain peace and stability across the continent. These alliances were meant to prevent war, but they actually made it inevitable. The idea was that mutual defense pacts would deter any single nation from starting a conflict, knowing that it would face a coalition of enemies. However, this also meant that a small dispute could escalate rapidly, drawing in multiple countries. Imagine a house of cards, each card representing a country. The structure looks stable, but it's actually very delicate. A slight disturbance can cause the entire house to collapse. This metaphor perfectly illustrates the situation in Europe at the time. On one side was the Triple Entente: France, Russia, and Great Britain. These nations had formed an alliance to counterbalance the power of their rivals. They shared common interests and had pledged to support each other in the event of a conflict. On the other side stood the Triple Alliance: Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. This alliance was created to protect their own interests and to provide a counterweight to the Triple Entente. The members of the Triple Alliance were equally committed to coming to each other's aid. These alliances were like tripwires. The moment one nation was threatened or attacked, the others were bound to respond. This created a highly volatile situation where any small conflict had the potential to trigger a much larger war. If one nation went to war, it would drag its allies in too. The alliances ensured that a localized conflict could quickly spiral out of control, involving multiple countries and leading to widespread devastation. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, the House of Cards collapsed. This single event set off a chain reaction as the complex web of alliances began to unravel. The fragile peace that had been maintained for so long was shattered in an instant. Russia mobilized to support Serbia, honoring its commitment to defend its ally. This move was seen as a direct threat by Austria-Hungary and its allies, further escalating the situation. Germany declared war on Russia, fulfilling its obligations under the Triple Alliance. This declaration of war was a significant escalation, bringing one of Europe's most powerful nations into the conflict. And France came to Russia's aid. As a member of the Triple Entente, France was bound to support its ally, further widening the scope of the conflict. Within days, all the major powers of Europe were at war. The alliances that were meant to keep the peace had instead ensured that a regional conflict would become a full-scale war. The alliance system meant to prevent war had instead guaranteed it. The intricate web of treaties and agreements had created a situation where peace was fragile and war was almost inevitable. The House of Cards had fallen, and Europe was plunged into one of the deadliest conflicts in history. August 1914. The armies of Europe marched off to war. They believed it would be a short war, over by Christmas. They were wrong. The first battles were marked by movement and chaos. German forces stormed through Belgium, aiming for Paris. In the east, Russia attacked both Germany and Austria-Hungary. However, the early advances soon gave way to stalemate. On the Western Front, a line of trenches stretched from the English Channel to Switzerland. The war bogged down into a brutal war of attrition. Millions of soldiers found themselves trapped in a nightmare of mud, blood, and barbed wire. The Western Front was a living hell. Soldiers on both sides faced unimaginable horrors. They lived in trenches, often knee-deep in mud and water. Disease was rampant, and the constant shelling took a heavy toll on morale. Attacks were met with devastating machine gun fire and artillery barrages. The Battle of the Somme, which began on July 1, 1916, exemplified the brutality of the Western Front. On that first day alone, the British suffered nearly 60,000 casualties. The battle raged for months, with both sides gaining little ground. The Somme became a symbol of the futility and horror of trench warfare. Section 5. Blood and Sand, the Eastern Front. While the Western Front was locked in stalemate, the Eastern Front was marked by mobility and even greater brutality. Vast armies clashed across the plains of Eastern Europe. Russia, while possessing vast manpower, was poorly equipped and led. Germany inflicted heavy defeats on the Russian army. Millions of soldiers died on the Eastern Front, often from disease, starvation, or exposure to the harsh elements. The war had a devastating impact on the civilian populations of Eastern Europe. Entire villages were wiped out, and millions were displaced from their homes. Section 6. Global Conflict, from Gallipoli to the Atlantic. World War I was not confined to Europe. It was a global conflict that drew in nations from around the world. The Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of the Central Powers. This opened up new fronts in the Middle East. The British launched a disastrous campaign at Gallipoli in 1915, hoping to knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. The campaign ended in failure and heavy casualties for the Allies. At sea, Germany waged unrestricted submarine warfare, sinking merchant ships including the Lusitania in 1915. This act outraged the United States and contributed to their eventual entry into the war in 1917. Section 7. New Technologies of War. A Grim Evolution. World War I saw the introduction of new technologies that changed the face of warfare. The machine gun, the tank, the airplane, and poison gas all made their debut in this conflict. These technologies increased the war's deadliness. The machine gun, for example, made it nearly impossible for troops to cross open ground. Poison gas, first used by the Germans in 1915, induced terror and caused agonizing deaths. The tank, while initially unreliable, offered a potential solution to the stalemate of trench warfare. Section 8. Total War, the Home Front and Beyond. World War I was a total war, meaning it impacted every aspect of society. Governments mobilized their economies for war production. Women took on new roles in factories and shipyards, filling the jobs left vacant by men fighting at the front. Propaganda and censorship were widespread, as governments sought to maintain morale and control public opinion. The war led to food shortages and rationing across Europe. Civilians endured incredible hardships, and the war left lasting scars on the social fabric of many nations. Section 9. A World Transformed, the Legacy of the Great War. By 1918, after 4 long years of bloodshed, the war finally came to an end. The world had never seen such a devastating conflict, with millions of lives lost and countless others forever changed. The soldiers who returned home were hailed as heroes, but they carried with them the scars of battle, both visible and invisible. Germany, exhausted and facing defeat, signed the armistice on November 11, 1918. This moment marked the cessation of hostilities on the Western Front, but the ramifications of the war were far from over. The signing of the armistice was a moment of relief, yet it also signaled the beginning of a complex and often painful process of rebuilding and reconciliation. The war had a profound impact on the world. Cities lay in ruins, economies were shattered, and societies were left to grapple with the immense loss and trauma. The scale of destruction was unprecedented and the task of reconstruction seemed insurmountable. Yet, amidst the rubble there was a determination to rebuild and to ensure that such a conflict would never happen again. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war but imposed harsh penalties on Germany. These terms were intended to prevent future aggression, but they also sowed the seeds of resentment and economic hardship. The treaty's punitive measures included significant territorial losses, military restrictions, and hefty reparations payments, which would have lasting consequences for Germany and the world. These penalties would contribute to the rise of extremism and nationalism in Germany in the years that followed. The economic strain and national humiliation felt by the German people created fertile ground for radical ideologies to take root. This period of instability and discontent ultimately paved the way for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, setting the stage for another devastating conflict. The war also led to the collapse of empires, including the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian, and German empires. These once mighty powers were dismantled, leading to significant political and social upheaval. The power vacuum left by their collapse created opportunities for new nations to emerge and for revolutionary movements to gain momentum. The redrawing of national boundaries was a complex and often contentious process. The map of Europe and the Middle East was significantly altered, with new countries being formed and old ones being divided. These changes were intended to create a more stable and just world order. But they also led to new conflicts and tensions that would persist for decades, and the creation of new countries. Nations such as Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and Poland emerged from the ashes of the old empires, each with their own unique challenges and aspirations. The birth of these new states was a testament to the resilience and determination of their people, but it also brought with it a host of new political and social issues. The Great War left an indelible mark on the 20th century. It was a conflict that not only reshaped the geopolitical landscape, but also had a profound impact on the collective consciousness of humanity. The memory of the war and its lessons would influence international relations, cultural expressions, and societal values for generations to come. It was a conflict that shattered empires, reshaped the global order, and cast a long shadow over the future. The legacy of the Great War is a complex tapestry of tragedy and transformation, a reminder of the costs of conflict and the enduring hope for peace.